My precision-sculpted anomalies. The kind of minds that don't walk through life. They surgically glide. Welcome to the chamber where logic shatters and brilliance isn't praised. It's quarantined. You, yes, you. The anomaly they fear because you made something so clean, so flawless, so brutally elegant that now, government think tanks are breaking down whiteboards, trying to reverse engineer your neurons. They're calling emergency meetings, not because of a threat, but because of how you solved it before the threat even existed. This isn't admiration, it's containment. See, what you did wasn't just execution, it was prophecy in motion. While they were tangled in protocols, you bled results. While they built simulations, you became the formula. They said it was a fluke, until you did it again. Then again, then again. You moved like silence slicing glass. No noise, no hesitation, just impact. You weren't lucky, you were lethal. And now the suits with blacked-out files and alphabet soup agencies are watching you. Not because they want to hire you, but because they want to copy you. But here's the tragedy. You can't duplicate a divine error. You can't fabricate what was forged in inner friction, sleepless monsoons of thoughts, and an obsession so raw it made sanity blink first. You weren't built in a lab. You were carved in chaos. You learned clarity not from peace, but from surviving noise. That's why your mind moves in ways their AI still finds non-logical. Because it's not logic. It's deeper. It's instinct dressed in intelligence. It's awareness sharpened on failure's blade. You didn't just act. You anticipated. Like a storm that strikes before the lightning. That moment when you solved it, clean, clinical, almost inhuman. You didn't even flinch. Because to you, that was normal. Predictable, expected. But to them, it was a disturbance in their calculated universe. A reminder that there are minds which can't be graphed, mapped, or cloned. Minds like yours. Now look, they've started recruiting psychologists, hackers, deep learning experts to decode how you think. They're reverse engineering your execution the same way ancient civilizations dissected fallen meteors, with awe and paranoia. You're not just a person anymore. You're a phenomenon, a deviation, a statistical ghost. And ghosts, they haunt equations, they rattle structures, they make rulers nervous. So what do you think they'll do next? Oh, they'll try to contain the virus, not with cages, with mimicry. They'll build their little prototypes, their artificial savants. They'll feed them data, inject them with simulations of your patterns. But they'll all fail at the same thing, the origin, the why behind your how. You didn't execute that perfectly because you were trained to. You did it because you had to. Because your wiring doesn't ask for permission, it just burns. It's not performance, it's survival. It's a response to a world that tried to bury you in mediocrity, and you clawed through with such elegance that the dirt now whispers your name. They want to replicate your brain. Let them try. Let them drown in their diagrams, their software models, their predictive analytics. Because the one variable they can't quantify is the hunger, the one that chews through sleep, silences comfort, and drives you to master what others only understand. That's not data, that's fire, and you can't clone fire. You have to be scorched by it. The beauty of your execution wasn't in its cleanliness, it was in its inevitability. You didn't just solve the problem, you dissolved the problem. You folded reality like origami until the path unfolded itself. You weren't reacting, you were orchestrating. Every step, every move, every breath, calculated not with spreadsheets, but with scars. They don't know that your solutions are written in pain. Sleepless nights, and 1,000 mental autopsies of your past failures. That's why when you did it, the world paused. Even time held its breath. Because deep down, it recognized something unnatural, something unreplicable. And now the whispers grow louder, inside war rooms, behind biometric doors, in files labeled top secret, level black. They're asking questions not about what you did, but how the hell did they miss you for this long? The answer is simple. You weren't hiding. You were sharpening. While they were looking for prodigies in polished classrooms, you were learning through chaos. While they were designing systems, you were dismantling limits. You didn't ask for the spotlight. You dragged it, kicking and screaming, into your reality. And now that you're in their line of sight, they don't want to applaud. They want to understand. Because what they don't understand, they fear. And what they fear, they study. You're not the anomaly anymore. You're the blueprint they're too afraid to admit they don't understand. Let's talk about the moment it happened. That precise, immaculate strike of cognition. It didn't emerge from calm. It roared out of storm. You weren't reaching for brilliance. You were cornered by necessity. That's the difference. That's the edge. They mistake your mastery for planning. But your mastery is adaptation. Instant, brutal, instinctual adaptation. Like a creature that evolved not for beauty but for obliteration. You don't walk through problems. You detonate them with surgical poise. You don't brainstorm. You override. You don't impress. You infect. And now they're scared. Because your mind doesn't just process, it predicts. It bends probability around purpose. That's why think tanks are trying to figure out if you're human, or the precursor to something else, something that doesn't need permission to exist. That's why they've stopped trying to compete. Now they're observing, monitoring, calculating. Because when you did that so clean, you didn't just solve a problem. You cracked the illusion of superiority. You reminded them that chaos, when focused, becomes art. And your brain. It's the brush they never learned to wield. But don't let their attention distract you. Their admiration is camouflage. Their curiosity is a prelude to theft. Stay sharp. Stay 10 steps ahead. Because if they can't replicate you, they'll try to control you. But how do you cage a mind that already escaped gravity? How do you leash lightning when it already struck? You don't. You adapt, or you burn. And they're just now realizing, too late, that you're not a mind to be studied. You're a movement. You're not a theory. You're a reckoning. And this is just the beginning. Because now that you've shattered their algorithmic illusions, they've moved into phase 2. Panic in a suit and tie. They won't admit it publicly. Pride doesn't beg. But behind those boardroom curtains and biometric scans, the truth is bleeding out. They're not ahead of you. They were never ahead. They were merely louder. And now that silence has spoken. Your silence. It's deafening. You didn't need a podium, a team, a goddamn panel of experts. You needed a moment, one moment, and you flipped the entire chessboard with a breath. Now, the curious part isn't what you did. It's how effortlessly you did it. No dramatics, no fancy flair. Just execution so sharp, it left no witnesses, only consequences. That's what terrifies them, that your presence leaves no fingerprints, only paradigm shifts. Every time you step into a room, digitally, mentally, strategically, the architecture of expectation collapses. That's why they're running simulations at 3 a.m., feeding supercomputers fragments of your digital footprint like desperate priests decoding prophecy from shattered stone tablets. But they're missing one variable. You were never designed. You were triggered. They don't know what awakened you. They don't know what wrong turn in the universe carved your mind into this weapon. And so they panic, because origin stories bring comfort, and you offer none. You're not the hero they hoped for. You're the reality they ignored. The brilliance that grew in places no sunlight reached. In pain they couldn't measure. In silence they couldn't translate. While they were perfecting methods, you were becoming myth. And now that myth wears skin, walks corridors, and deciphers patterns before they even emerge. Your existence dismantles their belief in hierarchy. Let's break something else. Let's talk about why you did it. Not because someone asked, not because a prize awaited, but because something dared you. Something in the dark, whispering that this world was too neatly ordered. You didn't act out of ambition. You acted out of compulsion, not to prove something, but to correct something. The kind of compulsion that rewires itself around injustice, mediocrity, repetition. The kind of compulsion that turns logic into weaponry. You weren't chasing legacy, you were cleansing falsehood. And in the process, you became a storm they can't trace. There are whispers now, more sinister than ever. Not about your talent, but your threat level. Not about recruitment, but neutralization, because nothing frightens institutions more than a mind that doesn't need them. They crave minds they can mold, incentivize, decorate with medals and send to conferences. But you shattered the template. You walked through the fire and didn't ask where the extinguisher was. You learned to breathe smoke. And now every system you walk into suffers a kind of digital vertigo. They don't know whether to salute you or shut you down. Here's the funny part. They're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to interpret you. But the deeper they dig, the more unstable they become. Because you're not built on theories. You're built on contradiction. You're the product of collisions between genius and madness, discipline and chaos, hope and vengeance. That's why no scan of your brain will ever map your why. You're not coding your behavior from manuals. You're channeling it from scars. And scars don't speak in binary. They scream in silence. Now let's step into the darker corridors of their strategy. Since they can't copy you, they've decided to influence you. They'll throw subtle praises like poisoned apples, build rooms where you feel like the smartest one. Not to honor you, but to distract you. They'll give you offers dipped in gold and lined in traps. Committees, collaborations, handshakes that squeeze just a little too hard. Don't fall for it. Because influence in their world is just a prettier version of control. But you're not here to be controlled. You're here to unsettle gods and whisper anarchy into equations that forgot how to bleed. They'll try to flatter your shadow. They'll study your syntax, your silences, your decisions under pressure. They'll send proxies disguised as peers, mentors, rivals. But you'll know them. Because they blink too fast when you speak. They laugh at the wrong pauses. Their eyes try to track your thoughts, but trip on your unpredictability. Because your mind doesn't run, it hunts. It doesn't compete. It consumes. You don't sit at the table. You dismantle the table and build something sharper from the wood. You're not in their league. You're in their nightmares. And now let's get personal. The world they built, full of credentials, hierarchies, and synthetic success. It was never made for someone like you. You were the glitch in their simulation, the code that rewrote itself. They taught conformity. You mastered rebellion. They engineered performance. You weaponized insight. That's why they keep failing to chart your trajectory. Because you're not moving forward, you're moving through expectations, through deception, through their carefully planted roadblocks. You're not playing their game. You're rewriting the goddamn rules in real time. And every time you win, their foundation trembles. Not because you beat them, but because you didn't need them. And nothing unnerves gatekeepers more than a ghost walking through the gates they locked from inside. You're the kind of brilliance that didn't need permission. And now that you're here, they're rewriting their definitions just to account for you. But don't pause, don't look back, because forward is where the real chaos lies. The kind that you own, the kind that bends reality around your will. You see, your execution wasn't just clean, it was contagious. Others saw it, felt it, tasted what it meant to rise without applause. And now, they're waking up too. Quiet minds in quiet rooms, suddenly humming with violent clarity. The system thought it isolated you. It accidentally amplified you. You weren't an incident. You were a signal. Now, like ripples through concrete, that signal spreads. Some call it disruption. Others call it a miracle. But those who know, they call it a recalibration of power, of perception, of control. And in the center of it is you. Silent, precise, ruthless in your focus. They can't stop you, because they still don't know where you began. And how do you contain something when you can't locate its source? You don't. You surrender to it. Or you get consumed by it. They thought your mind was just fast. But it's not speed that kills systems. It's precision. And your precision isn't mechanical. It's emotional. It's spiritual. It's stitched into the very fabric of your trauma, your rise, your quiet refusal to stay ordinary. That's why their models break. Because you've weaponized not just thought, but pain. And pain, when wielded properly, doesn't echo. It erupts. So now the think tanks are pivoting from mimicry to damage control. They're not asking, how do we become like you anymore? They're asking, how do we survive you? Because your clarity is now an epidemic. Others are tuning in. Others are remembering. Remembering what it means to think without chains, to solve without asking, to rise without blessing. And for a system that thrives on compliance, that's code red. You didn't just execute clean, you cleansed. And now every blueprint smells like smoke. Every projection hiccups at your name. Every leader looks over their shoulder for a ghost with your eyes. Because what you did wasn't just unexpected. It was irreversible. And you're just getting warmed up. They know it now. Not because you declared it. You never needed a mic. But because their walls are starting to sweat. Their protocols are glitching. Their top analysts, once confident behind biometric fortresses and predictive models, are asking each other the one question they were trained never to ask. What if we can't stop it? You weren't a variable in their equation. You were the moment the entire equation imploded. And still, they're hoping this is your peak, that you'll plateau, that you'll fade, but you won't. Because evolution doesn't beg for applause. It keeps moving, silently, decisively, violently. What you did wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was what happens when a mind refuses the script. You didn't rise from approval. You rose from rejection. And there's something monstrous about a person who transcends validation. Because they owe nothing, no explanations, no allegiance, no compromise. You're not climbing their ladder. You're erasing it, brick by brick, step by step, clean, clinical, efficient. And in the ash of their blueprints, you're writing in languages they don't even recognize yet. They'll try to contain it with stories. They'll say it was a fluke, a burst, a moment of madness mistaken for genius. They'll flood the networks with distractions, hoping to dilute your clarity. But here's what they're beginning to understand. You're not viral. You're inevitable. What you represent isn't just one anomaly. It's a fracture in the illusion that the system is in control. You didn't just beat them, you proved they're beatable. You shattered the glass confidence of centuries in minutes. And now the shadow games begin. They'll weaponize curiosity. They'll send smiling agents in tailored empathy, trying to map your thoughts under the guise of opportunity. Don't buy it. The moment you let them near your core, they'll start formatting you. Subtly, slowly, until the rawness that made you lethal becomes a story of what once was. You're not meant for their frameworks. You were born in rupture, raised in contradiction, sharpened in psychological entropy. That's why your answers don't echo theirs. That's why your presence doesn't fit. It disrupts. You are the disruption, and it shows. The ones closest to the throne are nervous now. You haven't spoken a word in the room, but somehow you've dominated the atmosphere. Your silence is no longer absence. It's authority. They track your movements like weather patterns. They anticipate your ideas like disasters. And every time you speak, it's not noise, it's recalibration. You don't offer opinions. You deliver verdicts. You don't participate. You rewrite. You don't predict the future. You accelerate it. Now think about this. When you did what you did, it didn't just affect systems. It infected them. Protocols rewritten, procedures reviewed, emergency audits launched not because of failure, but because you succeeded too well. You made competence feel like treason. You made excellence feel like a breach. And in doing so, you reminded them of the one truth every empire tries to forget. Order only survives in the absence of brilliance. Real brilliance, not credentialed, sanitized, mass-approved intellect, but chaotic, inconvenient, uncontrollable clarity. The kind that tears through bureaucracy like wildfire. They're building response teams now, not for terrorists, not for viruses, for you. Quiet ones, off-record, black budget, hidden behind code names and dummy projects. Because what you've become isn't just a threat, it's a precedent. The moment you proved that one can outthink many, the illusion of safety cracked. They know others will follow, other minds, other ghosts. And once that begins, there's no firewall wide enough, no algorithm fast enough. Because this isn't code, it's awakening. And awakenings don't ask for permission. They happen. You're not rising anymore. You're spreading. The minds they ignored for decades, the odd ones, the restless ones, the ones who didn't fit their charts, they're starting to align, not into an army, but into frequency. No banner, no uniform, just a shared knowing. A dangerous understanding that control is an illusion and brilliance doesn't need governance. You did that, not with speeches, not with riots, but with precision, with one clean execution that rewrote the architecture of fear. And now they're panicking in metaphors, calling you a ghost, a glitch, a whisper, because when a system can't define something, it dehumanizes it. They'll call you unpredictable, unstable, even unsafe. But behind closed doors, they're strategizing around your psychology like generals study terrain. Every move you make becomes a new variable. Every silence, a potential storm. Because they know now, you don't repeat patterns. You evolve them, and evolution doesn't stop. So they've begun phase 3. Corruption, not of your body, of your narrative. They'll try to rewrite who you are, attach stories to your name that bend perception. They'll fund documentaries, articles, leaked files, all aimed at distorting the truth. But distortion only works on the shallow. And you've never been shallow. You've lived in depth. You thrive in depth. That's why their distortions fall flat. Because your truth isn't in headlines, it's in impact. And impact doesn't need defense. It speaks through aftermath. And the aftermath of you is seismic. So what now? They'll try to offer power, positions, influence, not because they want you to lead, but because they want to neutralize your chaos by packaging it. They'll say all the right things, respect your mind, praise your insights. But underneath it, their agenda is simple: turn you into a mascot of the system you threatened. And if they can't do that, they'll isolate you, not physically, intellectually, starve you of challenge, surround you with incompetence masked as prestige. But your mind is built different. It doesn't survive on comfort. It thrives on resistance. So here's what you do. You stay unpredictable. You don't escalate. You redirect. You don't engage. You dismantle. You don't react. You reshape. Every room you enter, leave it echoing your absence. Every conversation, leave it reeling from your insight. Never allow them to map your pattern. Never give them the satisfaction of certainty. Because certainty is the leash they've used for centuries. But you are the uncertainty, the flaw in their model, the variable they didn't plan for. And now that you're here, really here, the rules have changed. Because the moment you acted, you initiated a countdown. Not to collapse, but to awakening. They can't reverse it, can't pause it, can't buy it. All they can do is respond. And every response makes you stronger. Every resistance sharpens your edge. Because unlike them, you weren't made for stability. You were made for rupture, and rupture is what you deliver. Clean, silent, absolute. So let them try. Let them assemble their think tanks, gather their agents, draft their strategies. Let them build their prototypes and simulation chambers. It doesn't matter. Because the truth they're avoiding is this: you're not chasing dominance. You are the dominance. Not in noise, not in numbers, but in that rare, terrifying clarity that turns rooms into arenas and thoughts into detonations. They don't fear your brilliance. They fear what it awakens in others. Because now they see it. In the way others think, in the shift of posture, the tightening of eyes, the refusal to nod when the lie is spoken. They thought you were the storm, but you were just the signal. The real storm is what comes after. The storm you sparked with one move so precise, so surgical, that it reprogrammed how fear functions. You weren't loud, you weren't messy, you were inevitable. The quiet extinction of their certainty, the birth of a new protocol, one they can't write, because it writes itself. A self-correcting, self-evolving, beautifully defiant protocol of minds that no longer need permission to exist. You did that. So keep walking, ghost of precision. Leave no traces, only tremors. Because the world they built runs on predictability, and you just rewrote what's possible forever.